until Democrats are willing to be a party that is willing to do a revolution, fundamentally change how things are, people just aren't excited by them at all.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Another thing that's been in the news recently is Democrats needing to reach out to men. And, I've always found this this sort of thing interesting because obviously, even though actually the median union member is a woman, but people think about unions and they think about men in hard hats. And there's still obviously a lot of men in hard hats, but in unions. And yesterday, these folks announced, and to be fair to the Democrats, I guess this isn't like something coming from the DNC, but there's a live stream happening, I think, this weekend between Micah Irfin, I think he's a TikTok guy, Olivia Juliana, who was, a big sort of abortion rights activist in Texas, and did some good work around that, I think, is my understanding. And Richard Hanania, former white supremacist, about how Democrats can win men back again. So, that's just like the most recent flashpoint of this whole discussion. But how have you been viewing this as a man yourself? I think how do you I don't know. How are you looking at this conversation about, Democrats talking about investing $20 million in trying to study men? How are you? What are you making of all this?
Yeah, $20 million for something called the Speaking with American Men Project, the SAM project. No relation, but again, the first thing to understand is that the Democratic Party is a racket for insiders. Raise money on how bad Republicans are, use that money to pursue awful messaging and lose, and then repeat. And there are people who are making lucrative careers, who have made lucrative careers out of this formula. So I think we are seeing it again. And, the problem isn't language, it's policy. And, based on what I've read about this SAM project, there seems to be an acknowledgement of what the problems are, and that the problems are indeed real, which is progress from when Hillary Clinton was running a campaign about America's already great. Nothing's wrong. Everything's great. But once again, the party is unable to offer any effective solutions. Republicans have are also good at talking about problems. Their diagnoses are often wrong, but they run a very grievance-based political campaign, which is pretty potent. So, I would advise Democrats to do the same thing. But when their answers to, why is it that men feel that they can't get a job that's good enough to eventually provide for a family, to get a house, things like that, the solutions coming from Democrats is stuff like home buyer incentive tax credits, workforce training programs, expanded child tax credit. Like, sure, those are good policies. They might help, but the electorate wants people to talk like they're gonna fuck shit up. They want stuff to be torn down. And I think that the electorate has wanted that since Obama, essentially. I think that his election was due to an electorate that was, pregnant with quote unquote revolution, not revolution as we think of it, but sort of an upheaval of the way things are, recognition that something is really bad and we need things to fix it. Now, he didn't ultimately deliver, which led to the next guy who's promising to fuck shit up, which was Trump. And he actually did. I mean, the pandemic and everything, and then you got, I guess, a vote for Biden to be safer. Okay, let's go to normalcy, but he ended up being awful. And I think any young man who was maybe 18 when Biden was elected, it's pretty easy to see why they don't like Democrats. Uh, they're just nothing was offered to them, and uh, they just come across as losers and weak, whereas Trump and Republicans come across as strong.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
So until Democrats are willing to like be a party that is willing to do a revolution, or fundamentally change how things are, people just aren't excited by them at all. Having said all that, there is something wrong with American men these days, particularly young men. When you see the splits between like Gen Z men and women when it comes to Trump, and when it comes to things like their thoughts on immigration, just massive differences, which suggests that there's like this wave of reaction that's focused on dehumanizing people, particularly people of color, particularly women. You see a lot of chauvinism within the media, that's the right-wing media that a lot of young men are tuning into. And these sort of vectors are stronger when you have times of economic pain and anxiety, which is what the US has been going through for a while now. And so, yeah, you have this wave of reaction sweeping the country that's been induced, promoted, spread by capital because it can distract and divide the working class. And like you have people like Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn who are considered, members of the counterculture now. When I was younger, right, the counterculture was left wing. Now the counterculture is Trumpism, which, these guys are kissing the ass of the president and having billionaires on their show all the time. Like, it's pretty dog shit counterculture. So I'm expecting that to flip hopefully sometime soon. And maybe the next generation of kids will realize that shit's not cool at all. Or, when these people get older, they'll realize it was all pretty stupid. But I'm not sure what you do about that if you're Democrats. Like, you can't just have a liberal Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan gets tons of money because he is ultimately a stooge of capital. He'll occasionally say things that appear to be populist or working class, but then the next day he'll have, the CEO of Palantir on the show.
Right.
Maybe if Democrats were actually willing to bring in more far left, anti-capitalist, socialist voices in the party, or at least use them as foot soldiers to attack the right and embrace the messaging more, and use their memes that Democrats feel like they need to start focusing on to win men over, they'd have a better chance, because right now the party is just filled with, very boring, weak commentators who don't want to really challenge power and don't have a message that it will inspire people and think that they can improve their lives, quite like Trump is inspiring people.
Yeah, I really think that's part of it, that the people who kind of fund all of these things on the right, they allow for a certain amount of dissent, really, as long as ultimately you end up supporting Trump, you can really say a lot. You're allowed to kind of step off of the reservation here and there, whereas there's a lot of, from to be able to get like Democratic money, you have there's a lot of conformity that you have to subscribe to, which is why programs like ours aren't funded by folks like that. And so I think that maybe that's part of it, that you can allow Theo Von to say things about Palestine and still ultimately support him because he was ultimately supportive of Trump. And we'll see if he keeps on with that too much. I think they'll put him out to pasture. But they're allowing it like for now. So I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's useful in other ways that they're willing to look past. I mean, ultimately, every day we get fishhook theory confirmed, where center and liberals would much rather align with the right if it means denying the left power. So, they would rather just have Joe Rogan at the end of the day. They would, than have their own version of a Joe Rogan that might actually bring forward a truly, working class critique of the party.
It really is amazing that like it is the same people who are talking about the left needs a Joe Rogan who were saying that Bernie Sanders is racist and sexist because he touted Joe Rogan's endorsement in 2020. And now they're like, oh, we need to go back on Joe Rogan while they were attacking people for doing that back in 2020. It's really, really, really disingenuous. You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.